Today's guest is an incredible behavior scientist for STEM industries, conference speaker, as well as overall such a lovely person. Today we have Dr. Lynda Shaw here with us. She is a cognitive neuroscientist, business psychologist, and a self-confessed brain geek. That's a mouthful. But she helps organizations not just survive, but thrive in today's fast-paced world. She has a knack for simplifying complicated neuroscience and communication techniques. She works with leaders and geniuses and teams and innovators to tackle big challenges like fear and bias and helps them unlock hidden potential. And in today's conversation, we talk about communication, we talk about listening, we talk about biases, we talk about wonderful things that help us live better, more fulfilled, more exciting, better lives. So without any further ado, let's go into our conversation with Dr. Lynda Shaw.
But before we start our wonderful conversation, I just want to remind you about our Patreon account. Patreon is where we put our gold nuggets. And boy, today we have a really fantastic, inspirational bit of advice. So well worth listening to. Patreon is a place that we are starting to grow the community, and we would love for you to just come and be part of it. It's a place where you can reach out and connect with Lenka and myself, and we will be putting on bonus content as we move forward. As I'm sure you know, the Patreon we're in the beginning stages of it, so we are growing it, but we are also putting content from older episodes on there in little bite-sized chunks so that you can really start to appreciate some of the wonderful topics and advice that we've had from some brilliant guests. But now that I've reminded you, let's get back to our wonderful conversation with Dr. Lynda Shaw.
Today we have a special guest, and I know we usually say we have a special guest, but today genuinely we have a special guest because I will tell you a secret. She is the reason why this podcast exists. She may not know about that, but because of the universe and because of her program, somehow myself and Natalie, we have reconnected years ago, started talking neuroscience, and somehow from there, this podcast became. So, no pressure, but please welcome the wonderful Lynda Shaw. Hi, Lynda.
Hello, Lenka. Hello, Natalie. How are you both?
We're very good and so excited to finally have you here. So, for those listeners who don't know you the way we and me and Natalie know you, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what keeps you awake at night, and what wakes you up in the morning.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a neuroscientist, a cognitive neuroscientist, holding a PhD in the topic, and I particularly specialize in unconscious processing. My research is about unconscious processing of emotion, because I pretty good at unconscious processing. You never know enough about the brain, to be honest with you. You are always learning, always learning. So yeah, I'm talking about unconscious bias a lot as a professional speaker. I run workshops, I have online programs, so on and so forth. So the normal way that we try to communicate. I'm particularly busy at the moment with training programs for in-house organizations, large organizations as SMEs. I have a psychology in my background, and my huge love, as well as the topic of consciousness, is social anthropology. So I've been driven all my life to try to understand why people do what they do in any which way I can find out. So adventure travel is my thing. What keeps me awake at night, how I could answer that now, or how I will answer that now, is very different to how I would have answered that a year ago. And basically what had happened was a year ago, I had these little tiny grandchildren, you see, and I was looking at these gorgeous little people who I want to devour. I'm going to eat them. They're too edible. I'm actually going to eat them. And they don't know that, but yeah. Anyway, I was looking at them and I suddenly got this horrible feeling awful feeling when I started to imagine what it's going to be like for them when they're my age. And I freaked out. I got really upset. So I thought, well, what can I do? I recycle things. I try to buy things from only sustainable sources where people are paid properly. I do all of the things that we know we should be doing, but it's not enough. So I sat with this. I sat with my thoughts for some time, and I thought, well, what is it the world needs? What do we really need? And I came up with the idea that what we really need are genius ideas, because we can't get enough of them. There is so much going on out there. Our planet's burning and drowning. So I thought, well, okay, we need genius ideas, but I'm not a genius, but I know how to communicate. So what I thought is, and have been doing since I came up with this idea, which was last December, so it's nearly a year now, is that I'm now working with genius people. And my target market is the STEM industries. So especially the engineers. I love the engineering brain. It's just my grandfather's a talented engineer, and my uncle was, and I just love the way they want to fix things. You know, they always find a solution. And that's just such a magnificent way to live your life. I'm sure it drives them crazy sometimes, but that's what they're like. And of course, the scientists. I'm a scientist, so and we speak the same conversations and the same way we relate to things. And yeah, the STEM industries are who I'm targeting. They've got a lot of geniuses in them. Some of the larger organizations do very well on helping them communicate, but a lot of the smaller STEM industries or STEM companies in the industries don't do so well at that. So I'm working with those people who have come up with those amazing genius ideas, but also I'm working with the teams of in the STEM companies, as well as other companies, even the law firms and people like that. And I'm working with the teams to pull out genius ideas to get to their unconscious processing, because that's my thing. That's what I can do. So I can pull that out. And then once we have got the genius ideas on the table, we can then go through a process of validating those ideas, bringing supporters to support those ideas, because even people who don't do anything are saboteurs. So you need active supporters with those ideas, and then you run with them to the point where you can actually communicate those ideas either by presentations or indeed any other whatever medium that people need to use, so they get funding and investment. So we go from right at the beginning, and sometimes we go back 10 steps and move forward 3 and go back another 4. I mean, it is that process, because we are constantly validating, constantly seeing if this idea actually really does have legs. And I'm loving it. And we're getting somewhere. We really are getting somewhere. So I'm hoping my grandbabies are going to like me one day. So, so when they look back at this grandmother that she did try to help, you know. So yeah, let's hope so. But there you go. That's a long answer to a short question.
Well, I'm sure your grandbabies are going to, love the legacy that you're leaving behind, because it's the intention, it's what matters the most. It's the effort that you put in. Obviously, no one can guarantee any result, but what you're doing is definitely way more than most people, unfortunately. But let's put that conversation aside. I wanted to add like just a little bit to what I said earlier, why you're the reason of actually for this podcast existing. Because Natalie did your course for professional development, your neuroscience course. I saw her lovely certificate on Facebook, and it was around the time I was like looking for something in psychology and neuroscience to get my development, to learn more. And that's why I reached out to Natalie. I knew her from before, but we were not much in contact. I was like, hey, this course sounds cool. Could you tell me more? So she told me more. So I then went on the course. I did the course. It was awesome. And out of nowhere, we have a new context. We knew the same stuff. We read the same books. We were going on the same things. We started talking. And one thing led to the other. We ended up talking way too much. And then we were like, well, maybe some people will want to listen to it. So then we started recording it, called it a podcast. And then we were like, well, maybe some other people want to join us and have a conversation with us. And years later, here we are having you on the show and talking to you, which is so wonderful. But I wanted to go back then to what you were saying about communication, because I don't think it's a problem just in the STEM industry with geniuses. think we live in a bit of a world that has some challenges with communication. There's so much divisiveness, there's so much fake news, there's so much social media noise, there's so much misunderstanding and miscommunication and overwhelm. So from your experience as, scientist, as a neuroscientist, as a psychologist, as someone who works with people, what are the biggest mistakes that we do when it comes to communicating? And are there any tips or insights you can share from, how the brain works, and from us, what motivates us as human beings to allow us, no matter if we are geniuses or not, to communicate clearly? And it could be in work settings, but it can be in friendships and relationships and families, because even there we can see that there is still we have a lot of challenges in communication, period.
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, communication is massive. In fact, I would argue that's probably all we have. Because poor communication starts wars, better communication ends wars. I mean, goodness me, everything is about communication, isn't it? Our cells communicate. We are a bubbling cauldron of biology where everything is about communication, with everything that's going on in our brain, with everything that's going on in our gut, with everything that's going on with all organs. I mean, we are walking communication, but we still don't do it very well. I think one of the problems is we've always got unconscious bias there, because unconscious bias, as I'm sure you guys remember, is a side effect of heuristics, and heuristics are shortcuts that the brain does to make it efficient and effective. Because if you imagine, there is a cacophony of stimuli going on out there trying to invade our senses and for us to process that information through whichever parts of the brain that is necessary at that time, and we can't do it. We absolutely can't do it. So we have to have attention, and attention is very small. So therefore, when we have attention, we're attending to something and bringing that to conscious processing. The rest is unconscious processing. So what we're then having to do is, okay, I might be able to take on some more information very, very quickly. And so below conscious awareness, we categorize it, and file it away in our unconscious processing. It's very quick. That's not at all in our awareness. And so if an animal walks in the room, it might have 4 legs, 2 ears, a tail, and some whiskers. And we were brought up with a dog in the family. So we think that's a dog, categorized, gone. Not thought about it, below conscious awareness, all of it. And then if you did actually spend time, a moment looking at that animal properly, you realize it's actually a cat. So we have this categorization thing going on, whereby everything, so much can go below conscious awareness, which makes our brain efficient and effective. If we didn't have that categorization, those shortcuts going on, we would literally be sitting on the floor like a blob doing nothing. We couldn't function. So we have to have heuristics. But the side effect of heuristics is unconscious bias and unconscious biases. So we're categorizing people incorrectly, or we are categorizing people in ways that are in a group categorization, where we are, like, I'll give you an example to explain. You're on you're in one of the major city, and you're on public transport, and it's midnight. And 3 men get on, and they've got masks on and a hat on, and you're very nervous. And you make them nervous. You've categorized them immediately. Your fear response kicks in, quite rightly so, because they may not be decent human beings, and they may be looking for trouble. They could also be three doctors who have just come off a night shift, and they've got a mask on because of COVID. You just don't know what is going on, but we've categorized them incorrectly or correctly because of the fear response, and we have to survive. So you can see how these things happen. We categorize people into groups, which is an issue. So I think with any kind of unconscious bias, let's take, for instance, in the workplace, I can see it. You have a bias about somebody, maybe not because they're different to you in any shape or form. It might be because you know full well that they are going to say things that you don't necessarily agree with. So you get these two senior people. One starts saying something, and this person does not let them finish. and they say something back immediately because they think they know what they're going to say. They are biased in the way they're going to communicate in that particular instance. And this conversation is going on, and neither are listening. They're not letting somebody finish the conversation, not letting somebody, finish the sentence before they've decided. So they are arguing against things that they're assuming the other person is going to say. I see it all the time in the boardroom. I see it all the time when I go around to companies. So yeah, unconscious bias is a big one. In our modern day at the moment, I think one of our biggest issues that we have is that we can unfriend people because they disagree with us. Either on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it is your platform you're using. If somebody disagrees with you, and we've seen it, people can be very aggressive, hiding behind the anonymity of being on social media, and they can be very aggressive, and you just unfriend, unfriend, unfriend. What's that doing to the art of debate? I mean, it's killing it. So we are not even allowing somebody to disagree with us, so that we might actually change our minds because they might be telling us something that we hadn't thought of. Where's the communication in that? It's not. And I think that's a massive issue. Massive issue. And the other thing, of course, is we're remote, so much remote working these days, distance working, which is great for global work, absolutely fantastic. But we're not with people doing those normal communication things, those normal observational things that we do when we're communicating. We're using a screen. I know that I'm now looking at the camera so you can see my eyes, even when I'm wearing glasses, crooked glasses, by the way. But I know full well that we're not have got proper eye contact. I want my camera to be in the middle of my screen, please. Technicians, listen to me. Put the camera in the middle of my screen. I'm sure you've got the technology. I just don't have it. Tell me where to get it. So we haven't got those things. We haven't got that handshake that we have in a business environment, or if we're they were with friends, to give them a hug. We haven't got that. It's all communication. It's all communication skills. So we have to work harder to make sure that we are communicating better. We're having to work harder in letting people finish what they have to say. I think this sort of environment that we're talking on now, that probably enables that, because people are taking it in turns to speak a bit more when you're using this platform. In fact, I'll give you something quite amusing. I'm a professional speaker, and I was president of the Professional Speaking Association just as we were coming out of COVID. And so I was the figurehead of a particular conference at that time. And it's the first time we were in the room, but properly in the room together. So we were really mindful. We had different coloured lanyards. The one lanyard said, "Okay, do not come anywhere near me. This is red." Another lanyard said, "Amber, well, I'll give you a hug if I like you." And then you get the green one, "Oh, give me a hug anyway." So we were trying to be really, really sensible with everything we did. And I stood on that stage. I was the opening speaker, and I said something, and everyone sat politely. There were nearly 100 professional speakers in the room. They're not quiet. They don't do quiet. So they all sat there waiting, and I thought, what is going on? Anyway, I carried on, and then but by 11 o'clock they were lifting the roof. And do you know what I think it was? I think it was a hangover by being on Zoom or Teams, because it's as if they were all sitting there waiting for their turn to speak. Oh, wait a minute, and it's like, but it didn't last long. It lasted a couple of hours, and we were back absolutely back to normal. But there is this thing of, so if you are giving people the chance to finish what they're saying properly, that is fantastic. But that's still not enough, because you've got to let them finish before you decide on what you're going to say next. Don't decide on what you're going to say before they've finished. They have to say it so that you are responding to the actual topic at hand, and not any preconceived ideas that you have. It's fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating, but communication is massive. And I see also people especially people who have not been in the workplace at all properly before. They've always been distance working. And there is a fear element as well. So things like when it comes to any kind of networking situation, people are even more afraid of it. It's not people's favorite thing anyway, but they're even more uncomfortable with this whole networking thing on how to talk to people. So, yeah, and so the problem goes on.
I love that you explain that communication is so much about listening. And for me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in business and life was that there are two ways of listening. There is a listening with the intention to respond. There is listening with the intention to understand. And oh boy, once you know this distinction and you then observe people, and I know it in myself still, how often do we listen and we're already thinking what are we going to respond? We're like, okay, get done, finish your sentence so I can speak. It's so much about us grabbing the spotlight and putting ourselves out there rather than just sitting back and listening and taking it in and not making a judgment and taking the time. And I think maybe it is because of the Zoom environment that we have almost lost also the comfort and discomfort with silence.
Yeah.
On Zoom, I don't know why. I've never had the feeling as much in person that people would be afraid to be quiet, or maybe just me that I've always accepted that, it's not the uncomfortable air quotes silence, it's just silence, period. There's no judgment to it. But do you have an experience with that as well, that we fear the silence and we don't have enough the gaps and space and white space or whatever noise in there?
Oh, space. Yeah, you're talking my language. Honestly, I use a calendar, an iCalendar, and I color code my tasks. There is no white space in my calendar. I long for white space in my calendar, and it's my own fault. I'm in charge of my calendar. But space, there is space to space in terms of I like space in a room. I don't like clutter. I like space in my life in terms of my time. And space, as you quietly rightly say, is simply just this. It's all it can take. Just taking a sip of water. It doesn't need to be awkward. You didn't feel awkward because I just took a sip of water. Nobody cares. That's all it takes, that little moment to gather your thoughts, that little moment so that you don't go as soon as somebody says something because you've missed a deadline and you're supposed to have done something by a certain time, or you've missed something. And you don't need to do that. Just wait, just pause, take a deep breath, big deep breath so that your belly goes out and comes back in again. Just something where you just allow your parasympathetic nervous system to go, hi, I'm here. Let's get out of sympathetic nervous system for a moment and let's, just be calm and alert so that you can have a proper conversation and not go straight in with our responses as we do. So this space word is massive. But you also said another word, and that is understanding. What is the point of communicating if we don't get to a point of understanding? We have our own biases all of the time. Our perception of everything is based upon all of our experiences so far, and the pyramid of those experiences are such that even if we all experience the same thing at the same time, but with the slightly different nuance to it, we will perceive it differently, and we will perceive it because of all the things that have gone before. So the order in which we are exposed to stimuli throughout our lives and the differences, the amazing differences that we can experience, nobody repeats the same pattern. And our perception is our only personal reality. So how can we actually communicate when, in actual fact, because that's our personal reality, it means we're correct. It means that everything we hear, everything we see, all the people who are watching this, who are listening to this, will all have the different opinion of us three based upon their experiences so far, their perceptions so far. And everybody is correct because it's their personal reality. There's a famous saying I absolutely love. It's not right, it's not wrong, it just is. I say it so often, and I have done for years. If we understand that perception is different, you may be thinking, or one of your listeners or people watching this might be thinking to yourself, "Oh my God, I know a Lynda Shaw, or somebody called Lynda, and she was a pain in the neck. She was an awful woman, I'm definitely not going to be your favourite person but your perception of me now is going to be based on what you think of Lynda in the past." It happens to be that all Lindas are utterly gorgeous, but that's beside the point. So, but do you see what I mean? So, all we can do is listen properly to get to a point of understanding, to get to a point of empathy, of compassion, and then we're communicating well. That's the thing. So, understanding that space, all of those things that we've just talked about, vital.
Talking about, listening and communication, have you found that there's almost this rush to finish this conversation because people are so overwhelmed with stuff that they've got to do, that it's okay, let's get this conversation done because then I can get on to the next person or hop into the next Zoom or go to the next Teams, or I've got another meeting, or I've got this project to do. So I'm going to just quickly listen to what you're saying, think up an answer before you finished, say what I'm going to say, and hopefully you understand it. But if you don't, doesn't matter because I've got to shoot off to the next meeting. There's almost this feeling of, let's get this conversation done because I'm busy and I've got other things. Is that something that you've noticed, that there's this rush, or this perceived idea that there's so much that we have to do? I mean, you mentioned that your calendar doesn't have any white space in it. It's filled up with projects, meetings, picking up kids or looking after grandkids or cooking the dinner or sending that email or having that meeting, whatever it is. That conversation or communication is almost gone by the wayside because you can say, hello, how are you? Fine, finished, instead of really, how are you? What's going on in your life? There's losing that time in the conversation or in the communication. Is, let's get the words out. I've got to say what I'm going to say. And I'm just going to assume that you've understood what I'm going to say, but I'm not actually going to stick around long enough to make sure that you understand what I'm saying. So is this making sense? Is this something that you found that we're too busy for conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, the sun's coming round here. I'm chasing the light. Absolutely. I think we are living in a state of overwhelm. And that will disenable us to actually calm down enough, to settle enough, to have a conversation for understanding. There's also another side to that, in that some people don't want a proper conversation because they don't want people to get inside them. Because if you have having a proper conversation where you are trying to understand one another, that means you're exposing yourself to be understood. And that actually is something that a lot of people are a bit wary of. They don't want to be understood. They don't want to be unraveled. They'd rather stay behind this nice veneer, thank you very much, and don't try to fix me. That's the other thing. Often if we try to, if somebody actually says, how are you? And we answer honestly, which is very rarely, and if we actually say, I am feeling lousy, I've just, my dog was put to sleep last week. Work is not good, going well. This is and people are going, whoa, hang on a minute. But actually, that person might be really kind and go, oh, I'm so sorry. What happened with your dog? And that you start talking about it, then you cry. People don't want that. They don't necessarily want to be exposed to that level of, don't get to know me too much, I might get upset, or I want you to think that I am this amazingly successful person, when in actual fact there's an awful lot in my life that's going wrong. So people are hiding, often hiding, not all the time, of course, but they're often hiding themselves, so that you being in a rush and being overwhelmed is absolutely fine. That's all good. That's absolutely fine. Let's all get overwhelmed so that we don't actually really find out how somebody truly is. But the problem with that is there's an awful lot of mental health illness out there where people are carrying on looking as if everything is normal when it's not at all. So I believe it's our moral duty to honestly ask, how are you? To honestly have a conversation where we show a little bit of vulnerability, perhaps. Not a lot, but just a little bit, because that's what people fall in love with. That is what people love about friendships. That is what people love about trusting at work. If you're in at work and you don't trust your suppliers, or you don't trust your customers or clients, or you don't trust those that you work with, you're not going to get very far. So that having those proper conversations, showing a little bit of vulnerability and not being so overwhelmed with stuff, with noise, actually will enable people to form much stronger relationships and also have a much more fruitful life because of it.
This very much touches on, our what this podcast is about, is having more life in one's life. And it is about reconnecting to that human of who we are, that inner human or the outer human or humanness, whichever one it is. But it's about reconnecting. And you mentioned vulnerability. It can sometimes feel really scary to say, I'm not having a good day, because will that person judge you for being, they're just being silly, or don't be so stupid, or what can you be having a bad day about? You've got the perfect life. So there's that judgment there, or there's that, okay, fine, good, because they've not actually heard you. They've just thought that you've said fine, because and I do that a lot. It's, how are you? Fine, I'm okay, and you get that. So the person you're talking to might then hear that. Meantime, you've actually said, I'm not having a very good day, and you put yourself being vulnerable, and they've not listened, so they've just brushed it off. Or there's, well, what? How can you have a bad day? You've got a great job, you've got a nice house, you got a great life. So just, almost like suck it up, buttercup type of attitude. And that can, when you're in that space, can be quite hurtful, and can break that trust, as you said. It can break that, and then you've put that barrier up because that person has either not heard you or ignored you or judged you. You put that barrier up, and then the next time they say, how are you, that barrier is straight away up. And you're thinking, no, I'm fine, everything's hunky-dory. I'm going to leave you at arm's length because you're not a nice person. But it's not true. It's not that they're a horrible person or a mean person. It's just, as you said, it's the biases. It's that finding it difficult to communicate. And that's something that I am noticing within myself, is I struggle to communicate, and I'm learning to communicate. And this is something that networking has helped me, is to have conversations and communicate. But with this brushing and these judgments, almost, it's like, how vulnerable can I be to somebody without feeling like I've been targeted? Does that make sense? And hopefully our listeners, it sort of makes sense for our listeners. So it can feel really scary to be vulnerable. And we've had speakers who've spoken about being vulnerable and embracing that, and even the listening. And there's that vulnerability in listening. And it's almost like we need to go back to being human in order to have that conversation or communicate. It's okay, wow, why are you having a bad day? Or what's going on in your life? Is there something I can do? Or would you like a cup of tea? I'm sorry, I'm really busy at the moment, but can I talk to you later? Can I phone you later? Or should we meet up for a cup of tea in an hour? It doesn't mean you've got to necessarily solve right there, but maybe instead of just saying, oh, yeah, okay, fine, but I've got to rush off, is maybe finding ways to communicate. So it's almost about relearning to communicate, but doing it as a human and not just as a busy person. Does that make sense? Am I sort of...
No, you've said a few things there. Well, first of all, what I picked up, when somebody shows a little bit of vulnerability, and they say something like you have just pointed out, oh my goodness me, you've got a fantastic job. What on earth have you got to worry about? That's called toxic positivity, and it drives me nuts. Okay. That is, you've got no right to do that to what anybody says to you. Never say, oh, but you are so lucky because, or well, how can you be like that when you consider what people is going on in the rest of the world? There's famine, there's war, there's this, that. What are you doing to that person who has explained that or touched upon the fact that they're not feeling themselves today, is that you've made them feel bad that they're not feeling themselves today. You've made them feel not worthy that they are having a bad day. So they will start to feel that they are not worthy in lots of ways in life. And you're doing far more damage to them than you can ever believe. And I've heard professionals say this, coaches and psychologists use this kind of language sometimes, and it is wrong. Do not use toxic positivity ever. Erase it. Don't say, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. No, do not. You listen. If you haven't got time, as you quite rightly say, just say, look, I'm sorry, but I would really want to have a chat. Can I buy you a cup of tea or whatever? But here's the thing. First of all, if you are the person who's shown that little bit of vulnerability, that is excellent and well done. But don't put it on repeat too often, because you can become that person more. You can become the label that you're putting on yourself. You can become the person who is not actually getting out of the spiral they're in. So try to think about, maybe if you're wanting to show vulnerability, to share it honestly, but not to help you actually get out of it, to get something off your chest. Because in actual fact, what the other person, the listener, is that just the listener. They are not a professional psychologist. They are not a professional that's going to fix anything. Nobody fixes you. You fix yourself by actually talking things through. So remember the dynamics going on here. And the point of you sharing any vulnerability is not so that you can share that vulnerability 20 times in a week to different people. It's actually to see if you can somehow see the light at the end of the tunnel, because you are sharing something that is really important to you. And that is an honor for both of you. The person who is sharing and the person who is listening. Is an honor that somebody wants to show their vulnerability to you. And it's an honor that you might be able to help them just by simply being there for them. If you have got somebody who is in a very negative state and they can't get out from underneath the table, then simply go and sit under the table with them. Just see what I mean? Don't try to be a professional fixer. Don't do any of that. Just be there to listen, or just be there. Probably Winnie the Pooh is the best person to listen to on that, and Eeyore. Yeah, you just have a look at that, and Piglet. Have a read of that, and I think that's how to be more human.
And I love that you said that, we need to either help others, but also for ourselves to just sit with it and listen to it and be with it and understand better ourselves and understand and heal ourselves. I think that's the point I'm trying to get to, is that yes, we have all these wonderful experts and we have all these books and we have all these resources and we have all these podcasts, but there's so much power that we have within us. that if we allow ourselves, if we trust ourselves, if we enable ourselves, if we give ourselves the space. And it's interesting to be in this time and space and environment, because I see people taking a lot more personal responsibility to understanding that we actually have way more power over our health and well-being and prosperity and faith. The more we imagine, the more we acknowledge and accept and take reins in our control. We actually have a lot more control. Not much about the world outside, but about us and how we feel and how we react and how we behave, but also how we then potentially heal. I would love to chat with you about this, because I know that you are very open. Not only you're a scientist and you understand how the body and brain works, but also I know you're pretty open with, then you can talk about the woo-woo world a little bit, about how manifestation potentially can work and how communicating with ourselves internally and putting positive vibes out there, positive beliefs out there, really is reinforced in the brain and helps us then to see more of the good things and get more of the good things and heal ourselves.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who like to write journals for themselves. Brilliant. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Science will support that. If you are having a conversation on paper with yourself, what a way to actually dump your head. What a fantastic way to get all of those things out of your system. And equally, what people often do is they have a gratitude journal. And we know that when we are thinking about what we are grateful for throughout our day, we are putting the brain in a pleasurable state. We are reliving some of those things that have gone well. So all of those delicious feel-good neurochemicals are going to be operating at their finest, because we are putting the brain in that pleasurable state. When we put the brain in a pleasurable state, we are dampening down cortisol, the stress hormone. We know these things. These chemicals are going to work. I mean, in beautiful way, in unison with our thoughts. There are three ways that our brain is wired. We are hardwired from birth for certain things. A bird is hardwired for building a nest. Human beings are hardwired for language. So if we are born and we find ourselves living in the jungle with chimpanzees like Tarzan, then we will learn chimpanzee. We learn to communicate. We learn for language. We're hardwired for that. But an awful lot of other things that we do, we're soft wired for, which means we can change it. So the way the brain is influenced. We're influenced by bottom-up processing, which is our DNA and our immune system. Now you can say, okay, I can change my immune system because I can strengthen that. I can strengthen my immune system by, or support my immune system rather than strengthen it, support my immune system by hydrating more, by sleeping properly, by eating good food, by exercising. We know that. But how can I change my DNA? Well, we know by epigenetics that the way the body and the brain actually interpret your DNA can be changed. And that can even, those changes, we can actually pass on 2 generations ahead. So to think that you can change the way that your body or your brain is interpreting your DNA for the next generation is incredible. I mean, wow, that's responsibility, right? Now, that could be a scary thought, because that is a responsibility, but it's the truth of the matter. So why don't we do that, therefore, deliberately? Why don't we deliberately decide to think in a different way? Because another way that the brain is soft wired is from all the top down processing, which is our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, all of those things. We can change our thoughts. We can change our beliefs. We can change the way we feel about something, our emotions. And what about all the stuff that's going outside of our body, our environment and our social upbringing? Our environment and social upbringing, we may not have been able to change so far, but we can jolly well change it moving forward. If we are not in a war zone or somewhere, if we're in peacetime and we have got a certain amount of freedom, we can change those things. So therefore, we have got an awful lot more control over our destiny than maybe we know, or maybe we even want, because it does come with responsibility. But I actually find that amazingly wonderful, that, you know, you can change that. Because basically how I think about it, in fact, this is my logo on my website. Our brain changes our behavior, and our behavior changes our brain, and our brain changes our behavior, and our brain and blah, blah, round around in a circle. It's this feedback loop. So how we behave will wire our brain accordingly, and how our brain is wired will dictate our behavior, and we can do something about all of this stuff. That's awesome. That is like, my goodness me, how much power do you need? You know, we externalize power. People, well, you know, you could be stuck in a traffic jam and you could be late for a meeting. So you're on the phone in your car and saying, I'm really, really sorry. I'm stuck in a traffic jam. I'm going to be 15 minutes late. Did it occur to you that you are the traffic jam? It's not the traffic jam that's external. You are part of the problem. You are part of that traffic jam. You start to think like that, you think, crumbs, I have got responsibility, but it's good. I can change that. I can choose not to be in that traffic jam, or I can't fly, that's for sure. Or I can, next time when I'm negotiating the M25, which is my favourite road, not, if you're around the M25 because of the horrendous traffic, I can actually leave early to make sure that I'm not going to be in the teeth of the traffic. You know, there are things we can do to give ourselves more control. And this is another thing. I'm sorry, I'm going off on one here, but here's another thing. I hear people so often say the brain doesn't like change. But the brain resists change. No, 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 no. We are change. We are this, as I said before, we've got, you know, new neural pathways, new synapses, dendrites. I mean, all of this stuff, we are changing constantly. Homeostasis, blood pressure, thirst, hunger, change, 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 change. We are constant change. But what the brain doesn't like is it doesn't like uncertainty, because it doesn't feel in control. So the brain doesn't do gaps in information. So if, like, for instance, I'm sure you all remember when we had COVID going on, that very first lockdown, I wager that virtually everybody who was affected by the lockdowns was on the telephone to their mates saying, what on earth is happening? What's going on Zoom forever, watching the news, anything to fill the gaps in, because the uncertainty was so strong. And with that uncertainty comes a lack of control. So what do? You control things that you can control, so that you don't feel so uncertain, so that you feel everything feels calmer in your systems, everything. So yeah, it's not the change we don't like, it's the uncertainty that we don't like, and we can do something about that.
So much information, and you are right. I love the saying that I read somewhere in a book somewhere, is you can teach an old dog new tricks with around the brain. And I love that. And when, like, my husband or somebody says, oh, but I'm too old to do that, it's like, no, you're not too old to do it. Just find a way to do it. And sometimes even I think, you know, oh, I'm getting too old, or I've missed that opportunity, or missed about it. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm not. And then I visualize you and I'm thinking, what would Lynda Shaw say? But it's, you know, I grew up with that saying, is you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think that's why I really picked up on that, is you can teach an old dog new tricks. And we even proved it. We had an older dog that we rescued, and we did teach him not necessarily tricks, but we retrained him. So it is right. You can. I love how the brain, you can work it, and it's not the brain, it's our thoughts. We decide we can't do something, therefore we won't do it. Then it's not the brain. The brain hasn't said, well, I can't do that, so, you know, don't even bother with it. We've thought it and have decided, made that decision, and therefore the brain doesn't change, or the brain can't do that, or I can't learn it because I'm too old. And it's as you said in the very beginning, the brain is so fascinating. It's such a wonderful blob that sits on the top of in our heads, on the top of our bodies, and just does the most amazing things. It doesn't look amazing. It just looks like a blob, but what it does is so fantastic, so amazing, so wonderful. And as you said, I think we can just be studying this for years to come and still not even understand half of what the brain can do or the power that it has. And I'm so grateful that we finally managed to bring you in, because as Lenka said, you were almost that first catalyst that got this podcast started. So it's wonderful to have you here. And of course, neuroscience is something that I know Lenka and I will talk for hours about, and we know that you love it and talk hours about it. But I'm also very much aware on time and on energy and time. So this is the bit where we like to get that gold nugget. Hop on to our Patreon account to get this episode's amazing and wonderful gold nugget. Now, if our listeners really want to get to know you more, go into your circle, or just connect with you anyway, or find out more about you, how can people find you?
Well, I have to spell my name. Isn't it annoying? You can probably see it on the screen. I'm not sure, but I'm Lynda with a Y. So my website is drlyndashaw.com. That's DRLYNDASHAW. And you're very welcome to email me. That's Lynda@drlyndashaw.com. I'm always delighted to hear from people. If you have a question, I will try to answer it. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out for you. So please get in touch.
And we will have all your links so people can connect. And yes, definitely, if nothing else, get onto Lynda's newsletter. It's a fantastic newsletter, some useful information in there, and sometimes even the little bits of funny quirkiness comes out, which is lovely. And it's a human writing the newsletter, and you really get to feel that. So thank you so much, Lynda. It's been so wonderful to see you again, because it's been ages since you and I have communicated. And just having you here with us just reminds me of how much I really loved doing your course, which I think is now 4 years ago. Can you believe it? 4 years ago.
I can't remember.
It was ages. And it's just so wonderful that we've managed to get together. You shared your wisdom, you shared your time and energy. So thank you so much. We really appreciate and had a lot of fun having you here with us.
That's brilliant. Thank you both so much, and good luck with all you're doing. And in 2025, I'm going to look out for great things.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners, what have you got from today? Has this really started to pique your interest in the brain? Is there something that you've noticed about bias, or how you feel about something, or just starting to understand yourself as a human being? It's learning about the brain can help so much. Or do you just enjoy this conversation or have a different perspective? We would love to know what you think, what you felt from it, what you got from it. Or is this something you're thinking, no, the brain is a bit much for me, I'm not ready for that yet? That's fine, but hopefully you've got something from this conversation. We would love to know your thoughts and any feedback that you have. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.